Hi, everybody.
Hey, Paige.
Hey, Paige. Hey, Maria. Hey, Rick. Lovely to see you all.
Hey, guys. How you doing? Lovely to see you.
Really good to see you. So I'll just do a little bit of an intro. So definitely one of my favorite people in SEO, the lovely Jason Barnard. And that's not just because you sent me a lead earlier. He's going to join us for a talk on Google is your homepage, learn how to optimize it. I think we've already got some people interested in elements that weren't Google My Business where you're going to be able to help out here. So I'm super excited for that. But if any of these talks are going to run over, it's definitely going to be Jason. So I'm going to be ruling with an iron fist. Get your Q&As in early as we're going through. You know, I like to scroll right to the top and go from the start. But for anyone joining us right now, we're about to start talk number 2. There are 5 amazing talks coming up, so please do stick around. Ask any questions in the chat and tweet using the hashtag 5hoursoflocalSEO. Now, Maria, if you could introduce yourself, followed by Rick, and then followed by Jason, who'll just jump straight into his deck.
Oh, goodness. I have to start first. I always hate that. So my name's Maria Grimm. I'm a digital marketing strategist with Grimm Collective, which is a consulting firm, and then also one of the co-founders of Relly, which is a marketing subscription service for small businesses, startups, and nonprofits. So over to you, Rick.
Great, thanks. Hey, I'm Rick Rodriguez. I'm search director at Vashi Refined Jewelry Company. And I absolutely love this whole idea that YouTube is your, Google is your, well, YouTube as well, frankly, but Google is your homepage. I think it's such a good, interesting topic. So can't wait to see what Jason's going to talk about, which leads me nicely over to you, Jason.
Oh, thank you very much, Rick. I think you actually probably know most of what I'm going to say because we've talked so often about it. Because I go on and on and on and on about it to the point of boredom for everybody else. And I'm surprisingly surprised that I'm not bored of it after 7 years. And that's the interesting thing, is the idea of what appears when somebody searches your brand name. It's your audience who's searching a brand name by definition. And I think people forget that. Anybody searching a brand name is by definition your audience and is by definition bottom or post funnel. So at that point, you think, okay, incredibly important, interesting for about 5 minutes. I've been doing this for 7 years and I still haven't lost interest in it. So if that gives you hope or it gives you fear, that's up to you. It gives me hope and it makes me feel terribly, terribly, terribly happy. Now, today I'm going to talk about Google is your homepage, learn how to optimize it. Mike Blumenthal has been talking about Google is your homepage for years. I tend to say Google is your business card, excuse me, but Google is your business card in a very kind of generic sense, as a person or as an international business or a national business. As a local business, it really is your homepage. Mike is right. And to start with, I'm going to do this delightful trick, is present myself through my own brand SERP. What is a brand SERP? It's what your audience sees when they Google your brand name. I'm the brand SERP guy, and this is my brand SERP, and I have Shaun the Sheep in my Twitter boxes. That's by design. Basically because I can tweet whatever I want and it would appear within 15 seconds in that little box, and I like Shaun the Sheep. I'm also the knowledge panel guy, not necessarily applicable to local search, but as we just saw with Joy, it is actually part of local search now. Mike Blumenthal is talking about how Google is bringing together Google My Business and the knowledge panel, the knowledge graph, and making one single entity. And I think we all need to start paying attention to it because it's going to be big news tomorrow. I've got 2 decades in digital. I used to be a blue dog. I'm there on the left. If you're colorblind and you don't recognize dogs, the yellow koala on the right-hand side is my ex-wife, and we created this cartoon and we built it up to be one of the 10,000 biggest sites in the world in terms of visits. And it was wonderful and it was fun, and that's what got me into SEO. I now have a groovy podcast. I did an episode, earlier on with Bill Slawski, which was absolutely delightful, intelligent, interesting, and fun. I'm a speaker and a host. As you can see, I am speaking, but Paige is hosting, so that doesn't quite work in this context. And I'm an author on Search Engine Journals, SEMrush, just written a new article about knowledge panels. If anyone wants to read that, it's actually really interesting. I spent all my Sunday writing it, and I think it's quite good. but you can slam me on Twitter if it isn't. And I'm a tutor and coach, and I tutor and coach brand SERPs because I'm the brand SERP guy. Genius. Right, the plan for today, and it's going to be half an hour. Your brand SERP is your business card. Oh, excuse me, it's not, it's your homepage because we're in local search. Rick's taking a photo of the screen, or he's taking a photo of himself to post on Selfie World, whatever that is, as a social media platform. You need to take control of your brand SERP because it is your homepage. A lot of people will not come to your site. You rely on Google to project the information about you and your brand and your offers, how good you are, and how much they want to buy or do business with you. It's proactive ORM, and I think people miss this an incredible amount. They think, oh, I've got a problem, I need to sort it out. But actually, if you start now, before you have a reputation, ORM is online reputation management, before you have a problem, it's a really good deal because it helps you to deal with any problems that might appear. And it also improves your EAT. People like Lily Ray and Maria Haynes will absolutely love this because the whole idea of a brand SERP is Google will show what is most relevant, valuable, and pertinent to your audience. And that means that it considers you to be expert, authoritative, and trustworthy within your industry if it's showing great stuff. And if it's showing bad stuff, obviously it thinks you're not so trustworthy, not so authoritative, not so expert. 3 steps to improve your brand SERP, and your brand SERP reflects your EAT, and I love that idea, and I think it's incredibly important, and we're going to talk about it more and more as the years go by. And then we're going to tell you how to create your prioritized task list. I can't talk anymore. But before we start, what do I mean by brand SERP? It's the exact match brand SERP, and I would be terribly, terribly happy if people didn't say to me, oh, that's branded search. It's not brand plus review. It's not brand plus product. It's not brand plus name of person. It's your exact match brand SERP, because that is what Google thinks the world thinks about you. That is what Google is representing your brand to your audience. And that is incredibly important. So we don't want any fluff. We don't want any noise. We want your exact match brand SERP. So there are all sorts of anatomies. Now, I did some research for this and I love it. The Oxford Cheese Company, I've got no idea why they keep popping up in all the studies I do. But, you know, that's okay. It's good. That's fine. And then you've got something like this, which is Citizen M. They've got multiple hotels. I think Rick and I did an interview in Citizen M in London. They have multiple places, so they get that map pack instead of the Google Maps on the right-hand side. And this is Calicube. And as you can see, Calicube is slightly richer than the other ones because I actually paid attention to my Google My Business panel, but I've also got lots of videos. So local brand SERPs can be very rich with those knowledge panels, with people also ask, with Twitter boxes and all this kind of thing. It's not because you're local that you don't deserve, in inverted commas, those rich elements like video boxes, like image boxes, like Twitter boxes, and like people also ask, because Google is only looking to show your users your audience, what is valuable, relevant, and interesting to them. And because I make a lot of videos are interesting to my audience, be I a local business or not. And it's your homepage. A lot of people don't even get to your website. I'm not saying don't have a website, because you do need a website. That website is your entity home. It's where Google recognizes that your company lives on the internet. But because a lot of people never get there, you really want to take care of what Google is showing your audience, which is a subset of its users. And I think we tend to forget that Google's users, this is massive billions of people. Your audience is simply a subset of that. And Google is showing to your audience, who is a subset of their users, what it thinks the world thinks about you. And it needs to be accurate, positive, convincing. I'm sorry, I'm punching the keyboard with great enthusiasm, and I'm sure you can hear it in the microphone, so I will now calm down. And it needs to explain who you are, what you do, and where to find you. And as you can see on this brand SERP, which is Calicube, local business, we could argue it's an international SaaS company, which would be really cool, but this is a local result. And it does reflect accurately, positively, and it is convincing. Those video boxes make all the difference in the world. And those products that I posted myself make all the difference in the world. And that red shirt just keeps coming up. And it shows who Kalicube is, what Kalicube does, and where you can find Kalicube. And it sounds so simple, but you would be incredibly surprised at how many local brand SERPs and brand SERPs in general aren't accurate, aren't positive, aren't convincing, don't show who you are, don't show what you do, and don't show where to find you. Now, I mentioned earlier on proactive ORM, and it does improve your EAT. Obviously, we can't measure expertise, authority, and trust, but it's pretty obvious when you look at a brand SERP. When you search an exact match brand name, it's pretty obvious if that brand is expert, authoritative, and trustworthy in Google's eyes, which is the important point within the context of Google search. This is a great brand SERP, and of course it's my brand SERP because I've been working on it for years and years and years. The green stuff is direct control, the blue stuff is indirect control. That's fine. Some things you cannot control, but you really want to control, because if you can control, you can make it positive, accurate, and convincing. You can control that quality. You can make sure that it's positive. You can make sure that your audience is convinced by what Google shows them when they search your brand name. So, bit of blue on your brand SERP, absolutely fine. That's third-party corroboration, which actually might be very healthy. If you talk to Joe Alderson, he would suggest that. A bit of third-party corroboration, independent corroboration is always a good thing, but I actually have indirect control over those pages. Now we look at this one, which is my favorite, the Oxford Cheese Company. I live in France, so cheese is obviously very important. And we have the yellow chunks, which are no control, but they remain positive. Now, that lack of control is not necessarily a problem, but it is a danger, as we'll see later on. And here we have, what was it? Oh, Bentley's Oyster Bar and Grill. Now, I can only imagine that they serve oysters that they haven't actually checked beforehand, and lots of people have been terribly ill after eating the oysters, but that's only a guess. And those red chunks, they're no control and negative. Those are review sites, and those are terribly, terribly dangerous and terribly, terribly damaging. But what's interesting, if we skip back, in that Google My Business panel, the control of even Oxford Cheese Company is much stronger than the control of Bentley's Oyster Bar and Grill. So even within Google My Business, you do not necessarily control the entire thing, or even semi-control the entire thing. Google My Business can still pull in those third-party results. So it's important to make sure that Google doesn't need to do that, doesn't want to do that, doesn't feel that what you're presenting to it through your Google My Business interface represents your business, and that they need to go and find some third-party information to balance things up. Here I would be betting Google thinks the world's opinion of this company is pretty negative, and it wants to show it both in the left rail and the right rail, as we'll see in a moment. Now, take a look at your local brand SERP. You want this. Ooh, that's me. And lots of companies obviously have brilliant local brand SERPs. It's not just me, but that's the example I'm using because obviously I want to promote myself. And you don't want things like this. And this one, although very good, lacks control. You've got the blue and the yellow, and it indicates that at least 50% of that space, you can see the real estate, is not directly controlled. And that represents, as it says in the top right-hand corner, potential danger. Any of these sites, as I say, would flip. They can flip. Somebody can change their review. They can change what they're saying about you because you do not control the site. The semi-controlled things, less likely to flip, but still quite dangerous, just in the sense that, for example, Facebook can change the rules. They can change the way they present. You can get bad reviews. So something like Facebook that you semi-control is good, but it still remains less good than something you fully control, which would be green. And this is obviously absolutely appalling, and they've got a big problem, and you're not going to go and eat there. I definitely wouldn't go and eat there. So how do you improve them? This is the practical part. Quick explanation, right and left rail. I mean, The left rail is traditionally what we've always seen with these blue links. We all know the 10 blue links. It's now become much more rich. It's got these videos. It's got people also ask. It's got Twitter boxes. It's got images. But it remains Google's recommendation of what information it has found on the web you might be interested in, given what you've just typed in. So in this case, it's a brand. So it's saying this is what I would suggest is most appropriate, most relevant, most helpful, most useful for you as the audience of this brand. And on the right-hand side, on the right-hand side, it's saying this is what I consider to be fact. It's not 100% true, but you can say left-hand side, opinion, right-hand side, fact. And that's incredibly important. So obviously the priority number one is the right rail. We are, as users, as clients of Google, and I do insist on the word clients. Google has clients like we all have clients. Google wants to serve its clients as best it possibly can. Those clients pay Google through their clicks on the advertising, but they remain clients. So it's trying to satisfy, just like you, its clients as effectively and efficiently as possible. So you need to optimize absolutely everything. Obviously, you start with the right-hand rail, going through. We want to go through the 3 steps. I actually think a couple of slides might have disappeared earlier on. Looking at the right-hand side, that's the fact. That's the Google My Business. Obviously, you get a great deal of control. Make the most of it. On the left-hand side, you obviously need to control it indirectly, and this is what this second part of this talk is all about. So there are 3 steps to fill the left rail with love in order of priority. You want to update those you control. Now, it sounds incredibly obvious when I say it, but in my opinion, the ones that seem most obvious are probably the most appropriate and the best advice you get. So don't just think about your own website. You can think about all the relevant pages within that website. For the rich site links that we see there on the left-hand side about podcast, CaliQ Pro, client contact, I've actually spent a lot of time optimizing them. And in the traditional SEO world, they would not be SEO pages. But in the Brand SERP homepage world, they are incredibly important. You want to optimize them. You want to make sure that Google wants to show them because it understands that they are useful destinations for your audience. And those rich site links, in this case on mobile, give you a lot of control of a lot of real estate, but also related sites. I mean, I've shown this example because the second site in that list is jasonbarnard.com. Now, as you might have guessed, that's my site. So above the fold on mobile, I've controlled, actually, you look there, the third one is me as well. I hadn't noticed that. I control everything above the fold directly. So I can update that at any time. So my Google homepage is always under my control. Google updates. Google will show more or less what I want it to show. You know, Bob's your uncle. Bingo, I'm doing very well. Then you want to look at improve the ones you semi-control. Now, these are social accounts, company profile, databases. They're things that you can edit, you can change, but you do not control the site at the end of the day. And if we talk about flipping, something like LinkedIn or Twitter or Owlet can change their rules from one day to the next. And although you control the account, you do not control the site. So you want to be a little bit careful about that. Very interesting, very positive. Just below those that you actually control, second best. Wikidata, you can go and you can edit it, but somebody could delete it. They could change it. They could put lies in there. So it's something that you can semi-control, that you want to optimize, that are great results for that Google homepage, but not as good, obviously, as the ones you do control. And then you want to push up the better results from below. And this is where we get into the ORM, online reputation management sphere. If anything, on that first page, if we think back to our friends at the Oyster Bar, whose name I can't actually know, Bentley Oyster Bar, there are bad results. What can you do? You can push up the content on pages 2 through 5 that you want your audience to see, because Google, remember, just wants to show your audience, which is a subset of its users, results that reflect your brand overall online. And so it's up to you simply to convince Google that the content it's currently showing is not content that reflects and is relevant and is helpful to your audience. So how do you create your prioritized list for pushing this information up? Oh, sorry, I'll go back a step, because that frog on the, by the way, on the side, I actually forgot to mention this. It's called leapfrogging. Don't drown. Please, 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 please don't try and drown content. It's creating spam. You create lots of content. You think, oh, this is going to rank. Nothing will rank unless it's on The Guardian or a New York Times or some big, big, big media site with a lot of power. You can't drown this content. You need to leapfrog it with content that you see and you can prove to Google is more relevant, more helpful, and more authoritative to its users, who are your audience. So how do you create the prioritized list of the results on pages 2 through 5, to push them up? You can basically say, I would like to push this content up. And all I need to do for that is prove to Google that is relevant and helpful and representative of my brand. So you can scrape your brand SERP, incognito, 50 results in your browser. Very boring, takes a lot of time. Click on all the links, collect them all, put them in a Google spreadsheet or a spreadsheet in general. Or you can use SEMrush, add it to your tracked keywords. Now, what I advise all my clients to do is add their brand term to their keyword list, which most brands don't do, because it allows you to keep an eye on what's happening, what's showing on your brand SERP, what's bubbling under the surface, and that's especially interesting for ORM. Or you can use Kalicube.pro, which is my platform that I'm currently building. It's in beta. If you want to apply, you'll see how to apply later on, and we do the next steps for you automatically. I built a whole system. I build it at weekends, and it's absolutely brilliant. Sorry, I'm getting a bit overexcited about my own system, but what was interesting is I've been working on my own brand SERP for the last 7 years. And when I built the system that automated what I'd been doing by hand, it threw up, which sounds slightly horrible, but isn't. It threw up 10% of results that I just had not expected. And yet I've been looking at this for 7 years. So it is worth doing it automatically, simply because it's quicker, it's better, and it's more organized, and it's prioritized. So if you want to do it by hand, scrape your brand SERP incognito, remove any that are not about you. Google obviously gets it right most of the time, but sometimes it can get it wrong. And sometimes if your brand name is ambiguous, there'll be results in there that are not about you. You want to remove them. I mean, I've used Yellow Door because it's so incredibly ambiguous. Please don't call your company Yellow Door or anything quite that ambiguous, because you end up with these very confused SERPs. Whereas before, if I was selling yellow doors 20 years ago, I would have called my company Yellow Door Company, and I would have been bingo away. It would have been brilliant. But today you want a unique brand name so that there isn't any ambiguity, so that you can start to control that brand SERP, so that those people, your audience, who are bottom of funnel or post funnel, see your Google homepage positive, accurate, and convincing. So back to my story, remove any that are about you, because obviously you can't do anything about them. Or, I mean, maybe you can if you really, really, really want to, but what you can actually do is push the other content up. You want to remove or move any negative results to another list to be left alone. Don't touch them. Don't try to improve those reviews if you don't have to, because there are probably review sites, page 2, page 3, page 4, that you can potentially push up and above this one. Because if you have a review site with 500 reviews and you have a 1-star overall score, it's going to be pretty much impossible to drown that 1-star overall score, because you would need something like 5,000 or 6,000 reviews to push that up to 4 or 5 stars. Whereas if you've got something with 4 or 5 stars on page 2 that only has 5 reviews, logically easier to push that up, show that it's relevant, make it active, because if you make that bad review site active, Google will think it's relevant because it's recent. So obviously take that with a slight pinch of salt. Every case is different, but as a general rule, I would leave it alone and try to leapfrog it with a better result. Next up, we want to tag the partially controlled pages on pages 2 to 5 Priority 2, we have priority 1, which is the great stuff. Priority 2 is the semi-controlled stuff on pages 2 to 5. The great results on pages 2 to 5 are priority 3, and you'll see why that works in a moment. And then if you've tagged something in steps 4 and 5, you prioritize it as 1. Because anything you partially control or you fully control, that is a great result, is obviously your priority number 1. Makes total sense. Then you get this incredibly delightful list in your Google spreadsheet or your spreadsheet. Oh, I'm selling Google's products, I do apologize. That you can prioritize and you can choose the ones that you work on, and you use traditional SEO tactics to leapfrog the lesser results with your finest. And that can include building links for another site. It can involve contacting that site and asking them to change the meta title, meta description, or the content. It can involve any of the traditional SEO tactics you would use on your own website, but for somebody else, for your own benefit. And the bonus tip, and I love this one, is the rich elements, and it could be a whole talk on its own, as you can see from my text, is that they are absolutely awesome. If you get those rich elements, A, your brand looks much more credible, but B, it takes up a couple of spaces and potentially kills a blue link, which means that instead of having 10 blue links to deal with, you only have 9. And if you get the rich site links, which are very much underestimated, I'm shocked at how underestimated they are, that's another 2 places. So in fact, this SERP, instead of having 10 blue links, only has 7 or 8. So I only need to deal with 7 or 8 blue links. The potential for a bad link, a bad review site to rank there is much, much less. It gives me less work, gives me more control, makes my life more peaceful, and I sleep much, much more soundly. So it's up to you to make it accurate, positive, and convincing, and ensure it communicates who you are, what you do, and where to find you. Don't leave it to Google. Don't think Google understands all of this stuff off the bat. It's up to you to improve that brand SERP, make that left rail really positive, really accurate, really convincing, make sure the entire thing explains who you are, what you do, and where to find you. As a reminder, your brand SERP is your homepage. It's up to you to make it accurate, positive, convincing, and ensure it communicates who you are, what you do, and where to find you. And if you want to track your brand SERP, you come along to Kalicube Pro. We work with WordLift and Authoritas, who both provide API support to Kalicube to track, measure, and to improve your brand SERP. The improved part is all my own advice from these 7 years of studying, and the 70,000 brands we're tracking, 10 million brand SERPs, 15 million lines from the knowledge graph. We've got immense amounts of data, immense amounts of experience. So the tracking and the measuring is Kalicube, WordLift, and Authoritas, and the improving part is all down to me, my experience, and my silly experiments that everybody has probably already heard of. Thank you very much. Google is your homepage. Learn to optimize it. Jason Barnard, the Brand SERP Guy. Back to you, Paige.
Oh, that was a mic drop if ever I heard one. Thank you, Jason. It's always such a pleasure listening to you. You're so passionate about it. I'm going to start with two questions for the panelists, so you can take a breather and have a 5-minute relax. So my first question is for Maria. Your expertise is much broader than us SEOs. How would you sell in brand SERP optimization to your clients?
So yeah, this is interesting. I'm going to kind of take it 2 places. I'm going to go back to the previous webinar where Joy was talking about engagement rings, because there's, keep it similar so people can understand that strategic part of it. So, one of the things that a lot of people often don't think about is their Google My Business listing, which is really important. So, when you're talking about, optimizing Google, customers trust reviews. About 80% trust reviews as much as they do about personal reviews. So I think really focusing on those reviews on your Google My Business, as well as including images. So when Joy was talking about, making sure you have product images in there. If you have special offerings, including that in your Google My Business post, adding those. Some of those things, those are things that you need to collectively do together, not just, focus on one, focus on the other. Unfortunately, engagement rings, you're competing probably with a lot of national brands who have a lot of ad dollars. So there's that. But just anything you can do from, a controllable environment on Google. I would really focus on that. And then we talk about the service-based companies who, don't necessarily have products that they can post in Google My Business or optimize for necessarily. I really think that, again, talking about reviews, I know we'll talk about this a little bit more and how important they are, but I just can't emphasize that enough. So when somebody is going and searching for, your company, and you're wanting to, they're wanting to buy from a trusted source. So if they're seeing that one company has 150 reviews and then this other company that they're looking at has 0, they're going to probably lean more towards that company that has reviews because they're establishing a relationship. People are buying outcomes. They're not buying products. They're not buying, tangible things. They want a relevant experience. They want to buy what they're, whether it's they want to have a beautiful ring on their finger or whether it's they, want to have a payroll service that they don't have to worry about. They're thinking about the end result. They're not thinking about what we're thinking about, which is getting that product in front. So I think just really focusing on how you can articulate and sell in that result page in a way that shows your customers how you're different, what makes you stand out from that crowded page, and can give them the experience that they're looking for. I think that's just really the most important thing you can focus on, rather than just feeding them with ads. It's giving them a relevant experience and giving them the outcome they're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. And Rick, how does local and brand SERP and reviews even, how does that play a role in what you're doing right now?
So reviews, I love the topic of reviews. Jason and I, I'm gonna plug this. Jason and I did a whole podcast on reviews a couple of years ago. I think reviews are awesome. So why are reviews awesome? Well, first things first, at the heart of Google sits a brain. It's the knowledge graph. It's the database of information that exists about everything that the search engine knows about the world. And I mean, it knows it in real form. Like, it knows it in the way that we humans do. It connects dots together. Its understanding might be subjective, therefore it takes lots and lots of data and tries to make heads or tail of it, rather than objective. That's the difference between humans and search engines. We can objectively do understanding through intuition, and that data point's really important. And think about it this way: reviews are a way of capturing lots and lots of data that exist about you, not from you. And as a brand, you may not have every single potential angle that exists around your business covered. And there's a great pattern that was put out now. Clearly, take patterns with a pinch of salt. They may or may not be part of the systems that go into what makes a search engine. But there's a pattern that discussed using review data to expand the information that search engines have on a particular thing. So a great example of this might be that your customers talk about the amazing Wi-Fi that you have in your cafe. You don't mention it anywhere, but if you want to show up for cafe with great Wi-Fi type terms, that's a really great way of people of Google understanding the things that you don't tell them. So I think reviews is a way of adding more information, or a way of search engines picking up on things that you don't explicitly say, can be a great way of doing that. Final point is, Jason uses the word corroborate, and I remember you picked up on that in the podcast. I remember that quite vividly. Corroboration of data signals is a great thing as well. Search engines use subjectivity, like lots and lots of patterns in data, to understand truth. If your reviews are certifying, i.e. corroborating your story, that's a great thing to happen as well. That tells you that gives the requisite data signals to discern truth.
Great answer, and great plug as well. I'm going to jump into some of our questions in the Q&A. So we've got a lovely question from Alessia Korobka. Apologies if I just butchered that. But have any of you ever encountered difficulties when you're optimizing for national rankings, but getting a strong local knowledge panel? Have you ever found that local versus national is a difficulty?
It's a phenomenal problem. The problem is obviously kind of national brands that have this national presence will tend to have a knowledge panel. Then Google needs to decide, depending on where this person is in the country and perhaps what they've been looking for in previous searches, shall I show them the national organization because they're looking to understand better what the parent company is doing, or shall I show them the local result because they're actually trying to get to the offices? And that's ambiguous, and it will always be ambiguous, and it will always be a problem. Now, what we saw during the coronavirus period is that local listings actually didn't disappear, but they were relegated to second place. And what Google will show is on that right-hand side, a knowledge panel and a local listing, or a local listing, then a knowledge panel, or a local listing, and then a see results about. And during the coronavirus, because that local intent had partially disappeared for much of the time, or some of the time during lockdown, the knowledge panels tended to dominate. So you have to look at what Dawn Anderson calls the probabilistic side of things. You can't freak out about it because it isn't you who decides what the intent of the user is. It's Google. What you can do is influence the information it has so that it can show the best results for its users. And don't ever forget that it's Google's users, your audience. They're not your users. They're still on Google. They're Google's users. So Google shows them what they want. And one really, just to finish this terrible, long discussion, monologue, excuse me, a discussion would be that Rick or Maria or Paige would have interrupted me at some point and said something intelligent. But the more confident it is, and that's what Rick was talking about, in the information it has about you, the more it will show that information. So your knowledge panel will tend to dominate with more confidence, as long as the person is not incredibly local and obviously looking to find your office or your shop. So that confidence, Rick talked about corroboration. I do love that word because I can't say it, and I sound like somebody with that problem with the rubbers, which, who's the guy, English
What's
guy?
the point you're making, Jason? Where are you getting to?
Yeah, sorry, I'm getting a bit mad. Yeah, okay. But the corroboration brings confidence, and that confidence brings stability.
Don't freak out. Don't freak out. I feel like was the best thing I'm going to take. I think we should all tweet that out. Don't freak out. Google knows. Google will serve the best thing. The next question we've got, I think you kind of covered this already, Jason, from Diana Richardson. What are some of the ways to tackle branded SERP if you or your company have a common name? So you mentioned Yellow Door. I work for Roast. I mean, personally, we lean into Roast Agency to try and differentiate. But I don't know if any of you guys have advice on top of that.
So I think this is an interesting topic. I guess what we're talking about is a concept called disambiguation, which is the idea of helping systems or things understand that two things can be the same by name, but very, very different things. A horse can be 3 or 4 different things, from a carpentry horse to an animal to another sister to something that they use in gymnastics.
Yeah, pommel horse.
Exactly, that's the one. I never knew that was called. That every day is a school day. But the point here is, again, it comes down to data signals and connecting like certain scenarios, certain points where certain results are successful. I mean, no, things like click-through rate aren't used in ranking, but they are used to understand whether the result set that is returned is useful to people on a macro level. And there are patterns and documents that describe this. So what we're not saying is if you get tons of bots firing your site, you're going to be #1 tomorrow. But on a kind of like macro level across all things, there is this understanding. Like Google can start to disambiguate things based on, again, the footprint that exists around it. So firstly, if your website says, this is what I do and how I do it, that's great. If it's then picked up by all of the things that goes on around you, from your online presence in local through to your wider presence in media, it could be that you've got positive customer reviews. It could be that you've got people talking about you on social. No, social doesn't equal you get to #1, but it does create this positive footprint. The more data you can get to tell your story, the better. And that can help with disambiguation as well.
Yeah, really good, really good. And one piece of advice that they can probably take away is we looked in our search console to see what people were actually calling us to get to us. So that's a really nice step if you're trying to lean into something that's a bit different than Yellow Door or Roast. Our next question is from GJ Brahma. How long does it take to have control of your brand SERP?
Ooh.
Time.
Well, sorry. Excuse me. Sorry, Maria, you had something to say.
No, I was just going to say time. I'll let you go. This is the whole the coaching of Google that we talked about. So I'll let you take it on there.
Well, give credit where credit's due. I was talking about educating Google, and then Maria rightly pointed out that once you've educated it, you can then start coaching it. And that's key to this question, is if you haven't educated Google to who you are, what you do, who your audience is, you can't even begin to think about coaching it. So as you say, it's time, and that time depends incredibly on ambiguity. The more ambiguous, the more time. It also depends on how much mess you've left behind over the last few years. If you've had thunderloads, I don't know if that's a term, of interns who have posted things all over the place that contradict each other, you don't get that corroboration and the consistency that Rick was talking about. You've got a problem, you need to clean it up. You need to clean up your mess. So if you've got a big mess, it's a lot of time. If you're ambiguous, it's a lot of time. If it's unambiguous, local, simple, clear, and you haven't created a big mess, a couple of months, you've got the education done and you can start coaching, at which point I pass over to Maria.
Yeah, I was going to say, talking about that, it's funny because, we actually just launched a brand new company for a client. And one of the typical questions is, when are we going to start showing up in search engines? So, and that's just kind of one of the most common questions. Some of the things that you can do too are submitting your sitemaps as you're cleaning up, using Google Search Console to help with that. So there's those little tactical things. But again, like Jason said, the more messier, the longer, and the better that you are educating it. It will take less time. But that coaching, continually doing those things. Google is a machine. And I like to say, kind of like Jerry Maguire, help Google help you. They're wanting to provide relevant experiences to their customers, and the more that and keeping their customers on their platform. So the more that you can provide that relevant experience to allow Google to give that relevant experience to their customer, I think the more that you will be rewarded, and the more you'll start seeing your brand showing up in the results page. So.
Can I just add something really quickly to that? And it's all about data lakes and data rivers, which sounds really boring, but it actually is quite interesting, is that we've become used to data rivers. Now, if we remember back 10 years ago, you had the concept is you would update your site and you would wait for the Google dance, and the Google dance would be a month later, 2 months later, and then you would see the results, what you've done. If people weren't in SEO before that, they will never have seen this. So this is kind of a new idea for them, but you need to understand it because it's really important, because those blue links use data rivers, so they will update pretty much immediately. You can expect if you update a page, it will update within a couple of days. If you submit it through Search Console, it can potentially update within a few minutes. But the knowledge panel, Google's understanding of the world and that corroborative information we were talking about earlier on, and its confidence in that understanding is still in the data lake stage, where Google puts all the data in a big lake, and then a big machine comes along and it goes through it and it goes, ooh, eureka, I've understood. And that happens, and I've got on Kalicube knowledge graph sensor, where we actually track when it updates to the day. And it tends to be every 2 or 3 weeks, with sometimes gaps of up to 3 months, which we recently had. So you have to be patient. So you're placing this information, you're informing Google, you're educating Google, but you need to be patient, and you don't expect it to understand from one day to the next. It will tend to understand in chunks every 2 to 3 weeks. It will improve that understanding. So be patient. You need to do the work. You need to clean it up, and you need to be patient, because we're working with data lakes and not data rivers in this specific instance.
Nice. I think that's a really nice metaphor for how you're dealing with those different SEO things. I think that leads quite nicely on to the next question. When you're talking about Kalicube, Usama Nasia asks, what are the best local SEO tools that you would recommend?
I have no idea. Can I leave that to Maria or Rick? Because I don't use local SEO tools.
You're not going to plug your
own? You should plug your own, Jason.
Yeah.
Oh right, no, sorry. Excuse me. Oh, that was that you were handing it to me on a plate. Oh, Kalicube. Kalicube is brilliant. In fact, actually, now you mention it, last weekend I changed it. It used to be this international tool where we would track across Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Canada, UK, and US, basically thinking that covers the world. And then I suddenly realized that nobody except Microsoft and Disney and Google themselves, IBM, actually care about all these different countries. I'm working with Yoast on their Brand SERP and their knowledge graph presence, and they care because they're an international company. But 99% of companies care about a country or a town. And so we actually, with Authoritas, just built the system to nail into towns. So we can now track any town, any country. That's obviously an exaggeration. I rely on Authoritas for the data. But we've nailed it down, and you can actually track very locally using Calicube. And I'm incredibly excited because the results have completely changed, and it's so much more useful than it was 2 weeks ago. And that was my Sunday afternoon coding last week.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Maria, did you have some tools?
I did. Well, it's a free tool, and a lot of people know about, but Trends. You know, one of the things that is real interesting with Google Trends is that you can like narrow down the search through the city that you're in. And another interesting thing is, you know, is you're trying, yes, you want to optimize for your brand, but what else does your brand sell? So say if you sell home security versus home alarm, or, you know, but people are searching for home alarms in your city, then you want to optimize for home alarms, not home security. So Google Trends is a really great free tool just to kind of see how people search and what you want to optimize for in that local community. And if you have, you know, if you're a bigger national brand and maybe people are searching something very differently on the East Coast than they are on the West Coast, you could optimize, you know, your different Google My Business listings to help with some of those trends that we're seeing. But it's a free tool, one that I recommend absolutely if you're wanting to kind of understand the end user in your community. So, and it sounds like Rick agrees. So,
yeah. I've also I don't know if Anton Schulke is on the line, but Anton is also WhatsApping me telling me that I need to get a better camera. So shout out to Anton as well. So my phone is lighting up like every second. But I will, Anton. I promise next time.
And also SEMrush. Let's.
Yeah, SEMrush.
Oh, yes.
That's my suggestion. Yeah, SEMrush.
Thanks, Anton. Fantastic. Next question is from Covington Travel. This may be elementary, but how do you get your Google business profile to show up at the right hand in that right hand rail? How do you get it there?
Oh, well, I can answer to a certain extent. Once again, we come back to the intent. Google decides what the intent is. I'm terribly intrigued by the idea that do we really need to worry about intent? If we serve that intent, it's Google's problem to decide what the intent is, not ours. Obviously, we can work towards convincing Google that we serve the intent. But at the end of the day, intent is more Google's problem than it is ours. And that, somebody uses Calicube. I'm getting confused. Excuse me. Yeah,
how do you get it in the right-hand rail?
If the intent of Google's user is local, you will appear, or you will tend to appear, as long as you've got a healthy Google My Business panel. And that's really important, actually, for the entire thing. Is I like to think of Google as a child that we're educating. We come back to that again. And Google will not stick something in the right rail, which is, in inverted commas, fact. It won't shout about something if it isn't sure. Just like a child will not go into the playground and shout out all these things that they heard until they're absolutely sure, because they don't want to make a fool of themselves. Google is the same. Google is a child. We need to educate it. We need to convince it. We need to help it be confident. Think of Google as your child.
And I guess as well, when you're talking that right-hand rail, it's a lot easier to get a Google My Business panel than it is to get a knowledge panel.
Yes, 100%, because Google My Business is basically a business listing where you give Google the information, it will show it on trust, as long as it's healthy. But one really interesting point, because we were talking about it earlier on, and I think this is really important, obviously not to think about right now, but it's something that's happening, and Mike Blumenthal has been talking about this, and I'm getting really, really enthusiastic, is that Google is merging the two together. Google Maps, Bill Slawski told me earlier on, was a proof of concept. And as I said to him, wow, that's some proof of concept. It's a knowledge graph, and they're going to merge it into the bigger knowledge graph, and it's already started to happen. So if you have a Google My Business, you also want a knowledge graph presence, and you want to merge the two together, and preferably, because the knowledge graph is independent of your own control, or at least partially, you need to make sure that you start nailing it today with what Rick was saying, by consistent information that is corroborated across multiple third-party trusted sources. And you need to identify to Google today where the entity home is, as Mike Blumenthal says, the canonical for your business, where Google goes to get the information from the horse's mouth, that it then goes out and double checks with all those third-party trusted authoritative sources. And that should be your website. Even if nobody visits it, doesn't matter. It's still your entity home. It's the way that you can educate Google so that after that, you can then coach it, as Maria rightly said.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick and Maria, have you ever created a right-hand knowledge panel for a client?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, a number of times I worked for a business that, or a company who are in the business of helping businesses get information out there. I used to work for Yext prior to my current role. And I actually just want to pick up on the point that Jason made, but which is around this kind of idea of Google surfacing the right information for intent rather than you trying to guess what the intent of the user is. I think that's a really interesting point, because I very much agree. Google has access to not only data about the thing itself, but it also has access to data about you in that moment of space and time and what people like you do at that moment of space and time. It knows this stuff. So even this whole concept of like understanding whether you are ranking number one or where you are is still a very, very subjective thing. You might be ranking number one for that moment of space and time, but you might not. And that's Google putting the right information that it has with the right user in that instance. But yeah, I mean, to me, I think the thing to remember is this whole idea of the knowledge graph. We talk about it as this amazing brain, and I'm going to go on a monologue here, so please keep me to time, and I'll try not to. But we talk a lot about this kind of crazy concept of a knowledge graph. It's a really simple thing. A graph database, and a knowledge graph is just information, is a database that is used to store non-uniform data in a way that makes the most sense. So relational databases, they have lots of tables. They take tons and tons of time, computation effort to get to answers. All a knowledge graph is a thing, or lots and lots of things that connect to other things that may or may not be the same type of thing. A pizza might have cheese, but pizza and cheese are not the same thing. And the magic secret sauce is the bit in the middle, and we call this the subject object predicate triple, so to speak, right? It's also called a semantic triple. The great thing about knowledge graphs and the great thing about this kind of whole way of structuring data is within each of the parts, you can go another level down, which you can't really do in a relational database. You can go, right, this thing is known by all of these attributes that we can align to it. So to Jason's point, making sure that your information's out there, making sure that you give a complete set of information in so much as you're able to, making sure it's corroborated, it's found across the web. That's the way to get onto the right-hand side, because you're filling in the gaps, you're maximizing the data that the system has access to, and you're proving to the system in a way that it's expecting that you are the truth or the trusted source in that. Sorry, I may have gone on a bit on that one, but I hope that's helpful.
No, I think it is helpful. And I've just seen something come up about like, okay, so what's the first step? And I think you guys are kind of touching on it. Maybe something like schema to just outline who you are and what you are to that 5-year-old Google would be your first step. Well,
the first step is actually, oh, sorry, excuse me, Maria, go ahead.
I was going to say the first step would be to Google My Business listing. Just go to or Google My Business. So that's step one. So.
Brilliant.
Now, Jason, what's your step?
I love that because I hadn't even thought of it. And it's so obvious. It's one of those pieces of advice that is so obvious. You go, oh, yeah, of course. Whoops.
Oh, yeah, that one's the easiest. Do that first.
So after you've identified and filled in your Google My Business and made it accurate, it's not the schema markup. It's identifying the entity home. It's that canonical. It's the go-to place to get the information, as Rick said, or he didn't quite say, but was implying get the information from the horse's mouth. Yeah. You want to be the source of information about yourself, and then Google verifies it, corroborates it, checks that it's correct. And that entity home is not necessarily your home page. It can be an About Us page, which is actually a really helpful tip, because if it's your home page, you're trying to be factual when you're trying to explain to this child. You need to be factual, you need to be simple, you need to have that schema markup that repeats what you've already said in the page, and your homepage is actually there to attract people and sell to them and direct them to the correct place on your site. And About Us page is a factual page that describes who you are, what you do, and who your audience would be, which is exactly what you want Google to understand if it's to start offering you up as a solution to its users' problems and an answer to its questions, their questions, excuse me. Then once you've done that, you write out very simply who you are, what you do, who your audience is. Then you put that in schema markup, you add it to your entity home. Then you go out and you corroborate and you make sure that your NAPs Now we're back to NATS, which is a very local search term, but it's not name, address, phone number in this case. It's date founded. I saw that whip through as a question earlier on. Date founded, incredibly important. It's an unchangeable piece of information about you. Where your office is can change. The date it was founded is the same thing as for us as date of birth. So if you say Jason Barnard, you can say there are 250 of us in the world. There's only one who was born on the 5th of June, 1966. You now know my age, in Leeds, in the north of the UK. And that's disambiguation. And for a company, it's date founded, founders. Full stop. It's the same thing. And you want Google to have those anchors. And you want Google to be convinced of those anchors, both on your site and on other sites, because those anchors never change. Your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, the founders of your company, where it was founded, you want to find those anchors so that Google never loses the crutch. I call it a crutch. If it loses the crutch, it loses confidence. It drops you like a olive stone or something. Whereas something like where you're living today or where your office is today, Google knows that can change. It's a temporary relationship. Who you're married to, unfortunately, is a temporary relationship for most of us, or some of us. I'll shut up.
And on that point, so Kate's put something in the chat that I think she's seen a pop up quite a lot about how do you remove those bad results about your brand? How do you kind of rescue your brand SERP?
Oh, I'll bet Rick's got something to say about that.
By creating more positive information about you, which can be, if first thing I think is acknowledgement, right? Everybody gets bad reviews. Actually, most people have this complex where they see a bad review and think that's the worst thing that happens. And my old company X did a study, and it turns out something like 70% of all reviews that happen are 4 or 5 stars and above. So generally, reviews are really positive. People like leaving positive reviews. The first thing you can do, I can't remember the guy that wrote the book. There's a book called Hug Your Haters. Read that book if you're interested in online relationship management. Great book. But if you get bad reviews, if you get negative results, try and engage. If you can engage with that person, you can give your point of view. They may remove that review, or they may remove that piece. They may give your point of view, and already you're starting to add positive data signals. And then the final point is, create some positive buzz. If you are selling a product that's really great and people are loving it, get your customers to talk about you. If you've got a great new initiative that you're doing, around CSR, make sure people can find out about that and they can share it. And just really start to create a buzz around what you're doing. You can turn negative results. The reason the negatives are there are because people are finding it quote unquote helpful. But if you can help people find utility in the stuff that you create, then you'll be able to use Jason's term, leapfrog that stuff as well.
Nice, really good, really good. And I guess as well, your customers and your visitors are semi-educated. If they see one listing that's 1 review from 2 people versus another thing that's saying five reviews from thousands of people, they're going to trust that one, right? So don't freak out. It's the phrase.
I was going to say exactly that. Don't freak out.
Don't freak out. Now, I've got a really good question here. I think it might be one of the last ones we have to do, but I really enjoy this because I've picked Jason up on this myself. Julie Reinhardt says, we've looked a lot at Brand SERP so far exclusively on desktop. How does this differ on mobile? We know that the majority of our customers get to our site on a mobile device.
Right. Well, the whole thing is just broken into chunks on mobile. So the reason I use desktop as an example is because you can say right rail, left rail, and it makes it really obvious and we can distinguish between them. So it's much easier for us as marketers to work with. The thing about mobile is that Google My Business or the knowledge panel can be broken into chunks. So somebody needs to scroll, there's blue links in between, there's maybe a video here or there. So it makes it much more complicated to analyze, to understand, and to act upon. So I tend to use desktop as the example, even though it isn't the dominant source of traffic, simply because it makes our jobs more structured, easier to explain to the boss. I mean, if you say to the boss, oh, look, it's chunked in, and this is actually part of the Google My Business, and that's... you're going to lose yourself. You say left rail advice, right rail fact, everybody gets it.
Perfect, lovely. And we are at time. Would you guys please give everybody your Twitter handles? They can go and chase you afterwards for all the questions we've not answered. Rick, go first.
Yeah, at Rick Rodriguez _ UK. Super creative, that one.
Perfect.
At Maria Grimm _.
Lovely.
Brilliant. Jason
Jason?
and Barnard written up on the screen. I would like to apologize, excuse me, to you, Maria, because I don't think you got enough speak time.
Hey, that's okay. And next time I'll get on there. So you guys have great tactical advice, which I think is what people are here looking for. So I am overall strategy in support of that. So.
And it's been a pleasure having all three of you. Thank you so much. It's been really, really helpful. So everyone, you have their Twitter handles, so you can go and chase them for all the Q&As we didn't get around to, especially chase Maria. But just a reminder that all of these webinars are recorded, so you can go back and watch them at any time. We are on talk number 3 now, so I'm very excited to introduce our next round. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.